You're welcome back to the program. Now, the Supreme Court says move on with governance to Governor Gboyega Oyetola of Osun State and to Senator Ademola Adeleke. It's a no, at least not this time. But how did we get here? Let's reintroduce our guest tonight. We still have with us in the studio Mr. Wale Oluwade. Is a strategy advisor to Senator Ademola Adeleke. He joins us live from Abuja. And here in our Lagos studio, Mr. GT Ogunye, a legal practitioner, joins us in our Lagos studio. And also joining us via Skype is Mr. Daniel Bwala. He's an APC member and a lawyer. Thank you, gentlemen, for staying with us on the program. Now, Mr. Bwala, thank you for joining us. I'd like to quickly put up something to you. Earlier on, Mr. Oluwade mentioned, he made a statement. Now, this is what he said. He says that the judgment, to put it mildly, is perhaps perverse. How do you respond to that?
Well, usually in Nigeria, funny enough, and very sadly, people who lose case in court will immediately start castigating and casting aspersion on the integrity of the judges or the judgment. Judgment is decided on its own merit. Facts before the court are what the court apply the law into and then arrive at a decision. Even if on the face value you think your case is very strong, if you fail to canvass your case before the court, you don't get the judgment. It is not enough for you to come out and begin to cast all kinds of aspersion on the judges or condemn the judgment of the court. In any case, the judgment of the court is the law and is valid and subsisting until it is overturned. In this case, there is nothing to overturn because it's the judgment of the apex court of the land.
All right, so let's come back to our Lagos studio. Mr. Ogunye, right after this judgment, I mean, if you look at what some people have been saying, people have been calling for reform in the judiciary. I mean, this is not the first time, but it appears this has once again brought up that discussion of reform in the judiciary. Do you agree? And what areas do you think reforms need to be made?
Yes, we often talk about the need to reform the judiciary. And reform is a continuous exercise, by the way. But I must say that what this speaks to is the need to reform our electoral system, the need to reform our political system. Is an aberration. And I keep insisting on that. I'm a lawyer, and I know the value of submitting a dispute before the court for determination. Section 66B of the Constitution says that. However, this should be an exception. Our electoral victories shouldn't always end up in court for litigation because the court is usually not in a position to then state it the way it should be. Look, the wisdom of the court cannot be a substitute for the wisdom of the electorate. And so each year, every 4 years, when we see lawyers, saying that, okay, the time has come for us to go to the tribunal, you spend time there and all that. What our judiciary is doing is managing a very bad situation. And so with practice directions, with rules, with regulations, they've timed it. So it used to be elongated before. For example, the Ngige example. Then they timed the 180 days, 60 days. And so when you're going to give testimony in court, in the tribunal, right, witnesses are, determined ahead of actual hearing, and then the time that will be apportioned to them will be so small and all that, they will not be able to exhaust themselves. For example, in the presidential election, how do you prove it? When the law says that you must prove irregularity from polling booth to polling booth, if you are alleging that it's widespread. So 3 years, they won't finish. So we must get to a point, right, where when election is conducted, parties will be satisfied. Okay. And recourse to the judiciary as the arbiter of electoral dispute will not be the norm, but it will be an exception. Okay. Once we get to that point, I think that the judiciary will be saved from these accusations, right, most often unwarranted accusation, because the judiciary is just trying to do a very, it's a bad job, but the judiciary has to do it all the same.
Okay, now you mentioned the presidential election, especially the tribunal. And I'd like to take up Mr. Oluwade on this. We understand the PDP still has, other cases at the tribunal, for example, the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. So moving from this judgment of the Supreme Court, what has it done to the PDP's resolve for example, other cases in the petition, like the presidential elections petition and other governorship elections petitions across the country?
Thank you. I wouldn't want to go into the presidential election petition at the Court of Appeal. Of course, that would be sub judice. I would like to focus on the Osun State, and I agree with Mr. GT to the extent that it is because electoral actors, misbehave. And then, of course, critically, because INEC, who ought to be an impartial arbiter, shirk their responsibility, drop the ball, as it were, that we all have to now end up at the judiciary, and then we call upon them, who were not there, when elections were conducted. Quickly, there are practices that separate democracy from other forms of government, maybe a monarchy that is by hereditary, or, fascism or dictatorship, which, just basically shoot your way to power. In a democracy, it is the people, that elect leaders of their choice. So the sanctity of the ballot, is sacred. Now, so when the people of Osun on the 22nd, elected, cast their votes, and Senator Adeleke won, regardless of the several deductions, illegal deductions, and the cancellation, he still won. And so now, Professor Afuakwe, the state returning officer, by his own, decision, decided, that the elections were inconclusive, cancelled elections in 7 polling units, as it were, because prior to that, the provisions of how a governor should be elected or returned, someone should be declared returned as governor, in section 179, section 2, A and B, states that you must have the highest, you must have scored the highest number of votes, A. B, you must have 25% in at least 2/3 of the local government in the state. Senator Ademola Adeleke met that provisions, of the Constitution. But why was he not declared as winner of that election? And if you listen, I was in court this morning at the Supreme Court, and it was gladdening, in a very strange way, because even though we lost, but it gladdened our hearts, to hear Justices Galinje and Akas, in a blistering rebuke of INEC that they were impartial. In fact, Justice Akas openly in the court said INEC rigged this September 22nd election, that there was no need for the rerun. It was a contrivance.
Mr. Oluwade,
what this portends for democracy going
because
forward?
Because of our time, let's quickly ask Mr. Bwala, final thoughts. After decisions such as this, there's a need for healing. There are parties on different sides, with different perspectives. So there's a need for healing. In 30 seconds, is the APC ready for this healing process?
I think APC is ready. The statement of the president on Twitter when he congratulated the people of Osun, he also made clear that they should proceed now to integrate the people. That means they should celebrate the victory with wisdom and then integrate the people.
Okay. Mr. Bwala, thank you so much. We'll be speaking with Mr. Daniel Bwala. He's an APC member as well as a lawyer. And also from our Abuja studio, Mr. Wale Oluwade, strategy advisor to Senator Demola Adeleke. And here in our Lagos studio, we're speaking to Mr. GT Ogunye, as a legal practitioner. We're surrounded by lawyers tonight. Well, that's our package for tonight on the show. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Kaide Kikiolu.